Hi, and welcome to SWIC Week 2, a series of Teams calls on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday this week. As you will have seen off the Eventbrite calendar, we're covering a whole spread of presentations and discussions this week. It's a little bit different to SWIC Week 1, which was very industrial based. This one is spread on a wider interaction with key stakeholders that we'll have to engage with as we go through our decarbonisation journey. And thanks so much to all those that are participating this week. So if you look at the Eventbrite page, you'll see we've got sessions today, this afternoon, tomorrow morning, tomorrow afternoon, and Thursday morning, Thursday afternoon. This morning we have the honour of welcoming Welsh Government, and thanks so much for them for joining us. They're going to be talking us through Team Wales, explaining the overall concept of getting Wales to net zero, but also then focusing a bit on how industry can support and play our part in the developing plans. What I need to make clear to everybody is the sessions are being recorded and they will go on YouTube at a later date. If that does cause a problem with anybody, there will be public access to that YouTube channel. Please let us know, and we can go through and edit and take various bits out. So please let us know if anybody has any problems with their question or point being made on the recording. So back to this morning. I'd now like to hand over to Dickie Davies, OBE, who is the Director of Industrial Transformation in Welsh Government, one of our key stakeholders as industry. Thank you, Dickie.
Chris, many thanks indeed. Barada, everybody, and good morning. It is lovely to see so many. Certainly at this stage, we've got over 30 of us on the line at the moment, which is tremendous. So as Chris said, this is the start of SWIC Week 2. SWIC, South Wales Industrial Cluster, has been in existence for 3 years and will morph in due course into Net Zero Industry Wales, which you'll hear about a little bit later on, which the Minister for the Economy, Minister Gethin, announced yesterday. And I would like to publicly thank Chris for his work and the work of all the members, the many members of SWIC, in facilitating this journey that we are all on and will continue to be on for many years. So in terms of this morning, we've got about an hour and a half just to introduce you to some key colleagues of mine, key colleagues in terms of policy and liaison with UK government and with business. We're going to do about 30 minutes of presentations, then some general questions, and then I'll throw the floor open to everybody. And please say anything, as much as you can in terms of how we can support each other, some of the issues that you have, some of the concerns that you have. So if we can't answer them today, we will answer them in due course, and I'll come back to you in a written way if necessary. Just to give you an overview, we've got a number of forums who support us, all of us, in this decarbonisation journey, ranging from an aerospace forum, an automotive forum, a technology forum, contact centre forums who are key, and also Marine Energy Wales and many others, Mid Wales forums, etc., etc. So we liaise with them on a very regular basis in terms of some of their concerns, some of their issues, our policy structuring. And we also, via our regional teams, we have 3 business development teams based on within regions: North, Mid and West, and Southeast. And it is those business development managers or relationship managers that deal on a regular basis with companies as well. So hopefully we are getting the feedback that you require to get up to us, and we are getting the strategy, the advice and the guidance down to you as well. So and obviously comms can always be improved, but I would like to touch on that a little bit later on. Okay, so in terms of our presentations, we've got presentations from colleagues John Oates, Jen Pride, Andy Rees and Gethin Wild. They're going to present to us in that order. I've asked them just to give them an overview, or give us an overview of what they do for sort of 5 minutes-ish. And then we will, if there's a burning question, if there's an absolute burning question, please come in when they've finished. Otherwise, we'll bring all the questions together for that 30-minute period when they have finished presenting. So that's the sort of structure, an hour and a half. Thank you very much for joining us. And please say anything, do anything that you think is relevant for this. No question is a silly question. Okay, I'm going to introduce to you John Oates. He is the head of Clean Growth, Climate Change Policy and Decarbonisation. Was absolutely key in the structure of the framework for the Environmental Wales Act in 2016, and key for green growth Wales, and also managing climate risk. John, over to you, sir. Thank you very much for coming this morning.
Thank you, Dickie. I hope everybody can hear me, and thank you for the opportunity to speak to this group. It's a little while since I've spoken at a SWIC event, so I'm grateful to be here. Yeah, so I have a couple of different roles within Welsh Government as of today. I have a role in trying to help manage, we're skipping through these slides, aren't we? I have a role in trying to manage our strategic climate change policy, but I also have responsibility for the UK emissions trading scheme, or Welsh Government's elements of that. So I will be taking you through two presentations on the bounds, really. First, I'm just going to talk about Net Zero Wales, which is our current statutory decarbonisation plan, which I presume you are all aware of. We published Net Zero Wales in October last year, just before COP26. And the purpose of Net Zero Wales, it is a statutory plan. It is to set out how we will live within our second carbon budget. And the slide that you can currently see at the moment gives you a sense of the challenge that we have and the process that we go through. So before a government leaves their office, they must set a new carbon budget that is at least 5 years ahead. So before the elections last May, we set a carbon budget for 2026 to 2030. We already had a carbon budget for 2021 to 2025. But we had some CCC advice that put us for the first time in the realms of net zero. Ministers accepted that advice, and what that did was ramped up the pressure on the carbon budget for 2021 to 2025. So instead of having an average 33% reduction in emissions compared to a 1990 baseline between 2021 and 2025, we increased that to 37%. We revised also our interim targets for 2030 and 2040 to be net zero consistent. So our 2030 target went from 45% up to 63%. So you can see that's a pretty significant increase in ambition. And just to put it in context, our 2020 interim target was 27%. We will have outstripped that, not just because of COVID, but we will have outstripped that anyway, we fully expect. But we're probably going to have to do as much decarbonisation in Wales in the next 10 years as we've achieved in the previous 30. So that's a significant challenge. Next slide, please. Can you just, click on. So the plan is a not particularly exciting structure, frankly. Part one sets the overall vision for Wales 2025 and beyond, and sets out the overall reduction
I'm so sorry to interrupt, Jonathan. I think the slides are on a timer, so that's why it's flying through them. So we're trying to work out how to stop it for you.
Okay,
apologies.
You. Yeah, no, apologies for me. I didn't look them in presentation form before I sent them over. Part 2 is about capturing those policies that don't necessarily of themselves reduce carbon emissions, but are really, really important in the future economy of Wales. So that'd be, for example, skills. In of themselves don't necessarily reduce carbon emissions, but are going to be really important. Part 3 is about the emissions sector chapters, and therefore that is predominantly for the interest of this group. There's an industry and business chapter, which I hope a number of you have looked at. And then part 4 is quite dull about how we will monitor our emissions, but also captures about how we will consider consumption emissions, because our targets that I described earlier on are about territorial emissions, not consumption emissions. But that doesn't mean to say that we're not very much interested in consumption emissions. We are. If we weren't, the argument is, well, you just offshore all your emissions, don't you? But we're clearly not interested in doing that. We have globally responsible approaches within Wales, and also we want to retain manufacturing and production of goods in Wales. So we are interested in territorial consumption emissions too. And part 5 is just about next steps. Next slide. Sorry about this. Next slide, please. And what we end up with through some modelling, we had some CCC advice. We deviate from that CCC advice a little bit. There are some areas where we think we can go a little bit faster than the CCC. There's some areas where we don't think we can. But we add it all up, and then for each of the emission sectors, we created a pathway, and that pathway goes beyond 2025. But this plan is very much interested in 2020, the period to 2025, and then how we lay the foundations for future decarbonisation. I'm good with that slide now. A key thing really about the plan, and I think what sets us a little bit apart from the UK government, is the First Minister was very, very keen for this plan to be an all Wales plan. We've gone through periods, certainly over the last 10 years, where in some areas, all eyes turn towards Welsh Government and UK Government and say, well, what are you going to do to deliver decarbonisation? And as I'm sure everybody appreciates on this call, we've all got a responsibility there, either in the work that we do or as how we live as citizens. And so within our plan, and this sets it apart a little bit from the UK Government Net Zero strategy, which was a lot about technology and not a lot about behaviour change. We have a greater focus on behaviour change, more aligned to the CCC advice, I suspect, than the UK government's net zero strategy. But we also have the working together to reach net zero document as well, which tries to encapsulate a lot of the changes that we expect to see being delivered by others, including business and industry. Next slide, please. So from an industry and business perspective, what the plan does recognise, I think, is that pathways to net zero are uncertain. A lot of the technologies that we may rely on in the future, such as carbon capture and storage and hydrogen, are prohibitively expensive or not technically feasible at the moment. We are dealing with significant economic headwinds, which I don't need to go into, but there are prizes to be had. You know, we do believe that we can deliver a lower waste and therefore lower cost economy that will help improve business competitiveness, create new global markets, and hopefully a high skilled workforce as well. So we do believe there are significant prizes available in reaching net zero. So that's the end of my net zero chat. And I think I'm just going to rattle straight through onto talking about the UK ETS, which I have the rare privilege of leading in Welsh Government. Next slide, please. In fact, you can skip on a little bit. What I'm going to talk about is you may all be aware that On Friday, we published a consultation alongside UK Government, Scottish Government and Northern Ireland on how we will develop the UK ETS. So the UK ETS was a Brexit gift. We used to participate in the EU ETS, and from the 1st of January 2021, we introduced the UK ETS as a response to Brexit to replace the EU ETS in the UK. It currently captures industry, aviation and fossil fuel power. And it's really important in Wales. It's really important because the participants captured by the UK ETS in Wales are big employers. And it also captures 45% of our emissions compared to only 25% of the UK as a whole, about 20% in Scotland. So it's a big deal for us in Wales. So the UK ETS is not a UK government scheme. It is jointly operated by UK government, Scottish Government, Northern Ireland Executive and Welsh Government. So therefore the consultation on how we will develop it further was published by us all. Next slide, please. The UK ETS is difficult. The idea of the UK ETS is that we have a carbon price that has historically been quite low, but is now at an all-time high. That carbon price incentivizes abatement of emissions at the lowest cost. So at the point at which that cost becomes higher than the cost of reducing emissions, you stop paying for allowances to allow you to emit, and you abate your emissions instead. So as certain sectors abate their emissions, that reduces their call on allowances. It helps to moderate the carbon price and maintains a market. It is very much market driven. This is not a carbon tax. The Treasury did consult a couple of years ago on replacing the UK ETS or the EU ETS with a carbon tax. This is very much market driven, and market participants influence the price. Clearly, if that price is too high, we do risk carbon leakage. And I mentioned earlier on, we are interested in consumption emissions, not just territorial emissions. And there is no sense in forcing production overseas and paying for higher carbon products then that come into the UK from overseas. And then there's a tension about who pays for it. So industry in Wales gets a lot of free allowances because of carbon leakage risk. So and that provides an incentive to abate and then sell those allowances that have been acquired for free. Power generators generally pass on that cost to consumers, and there's a fairness question there. And industry, as we know, struggles to pass on that cost to consumers and has to absorb some of those costs if it can't abate. And of course, the UK ETS will generate about 6 billion of revenue for the Treasury. I will emphasize for the Treasury, not for Welsh Government, in this financial year that we're just coming to an end of. And there is a question, certainly the Welsh Government ministers are asking regularly of ministers in UK about the transparency of how much of that comes back to business to assist in the decarbonisation of industry. Next slide, please. So the consultation that we've got published gets us on off the dotted line, which is the current cap of allowances, onto a net zero cap, and the blue range that you see there is what's published in the consultation. So that indicates a very, very sharp reduction in the number of allowances available from 2024. Just to provide a little bit of context there, though, the number of allowances required to cover all emissions in 2020 was about 105 megatons, so well below the cap that you see there. So it's not necessarily as stark a reduction in allowances as is first envisaged by that graph there. But that is what we're consulting on at the moment. That is that we think is consistent with net zero Wales across the UK as a whole. And when we come to a government response, we will pick a cap within that range. Next slide, please. We'll also, in the consultation, looking at free allocations. So these are the allowances that are offered to business who are at risk of carbon leakage. We suspect there are areas where we can target those allowances better. So, for example, we've done a fair amount of research, and this is captured within the consultation about aviation. We are doubtful about the level of risk of carbon leakage for the aviation sector. There are no participants in Wales, actually, in ETS terms related to aviation. But as we reduce the cap, we're going to have to reduce the number of overall free allowances, and so therefore we want to be able to target them better for organisations at genuine risk of carbon leakage. So that's the process that we're trying to go through, and we're consulting on that at the moment. Next slide, please. And there's a bunch of other things we're consulting on as well. So there are some allowances that we currently have in the system that haven't been allocated for auction. We are setting out expectation that we may in the future put some more allowances out for auction, and the details are in the consultation. I won't go into the detail here, it's too complicated or too time consuming. We're looking at potentially expanding the UK emissions trading scheme to be a larger scheme. So we're currently looking at domestic shipping. Very early stages are looking at agriculture, greenhouse gas removals, and energy from waste. So making some technical changes to the existing scope, many of them very wonkish, but some participants on this call may be interested in them. And we're making some operational amendments to help it run a little bit more smoothly. So that's the general overview of the consultation. I'm sure the companies that you work for will be looking at it and poring through it and talking to various trade bodies and responding. And we look forward to those, and we'll be running a whole bunch of consultation events with the other governments of the UK. And I'll leave it there.
John, superb. Thank you very much indeed. Are there any burners, any absolute burners from anybody? Otherwise, we'll just move on and we'll collect and collate a little bit later on. Okay, I'm very interested in terms of the new sectors for ETS, John. Brilliant. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, great pleasure now to introduce another dear colleague and friend of mine, Jen Pride. Jen is the head of energy delivery, has done many jobs prior to this in terms of policy and delivery, and she leads on energy delivery, focusing on enabling the low carbon distributed energy system in Wales, and has done lots of things before this, including running her own SME, risk management consultant, and was a member of the TA, and I take my hat off to her for that particular role, as well as her current one. Jen, over to you.
Thanks very much, Dickie, and thanks for the opportunity today to talk about shaping the energy system in Wales. Next slide, please. So this is an image that we use to represent the much more complex energy system that we're already seeing evolve and that we're going to move to in a low carbon future. The Deputy Minister talked to the Marine Energy Wales conference last week about the fact that you can either have change happen to you, or you can embrace and shape that change. And my current role and the small team that I lead has been established to represent the Minister's desires to embrace and shape that change. So talking today about how we're actually working to develop an energy plan for Wales to reduce uncertainty and to focus Team Wales on delivering the energy system that we in Wales want and need. Next slide, please. So we've worked with each of the 4 regions in Wales to develop an energy strategy over the last 2 years, and these set the high level ambition for the region for energy across transport, power, heat, and energy generation, of course. And what probably more importantly they do, they create a space for joint working to deliver on these ambitions. Next slide, please. So this is the strategy on a page. I'm using the Cardiff Capital Region one as an example, just happened to be the one I pulled out of the bag this time. So as you can see, that the strategy sets out the scale of change that's required by 2035 in order to get us to net zero by 2050. And it identifies specific priorities for the region. And this one actually includes commercial and industrial decarbonisation as a key part. I won't go through that in any more detail, but one of the key elements that we focused on was the economic opportunities that arise from a successful decarbonisation of the energy system within each of the regions. This is one of 3 tiers in the iterative approach that we're taking between the local to national energy planning process. Next slide, please. So a key element of the delivery plan for regional energy strategies is to roll out the local energy planning. And you can see there we've got the national on the left, regional in the centre, and then local on the right. It doesn't mean to say that any of them got priorities. It's very much increasing level of detail that's reflected, but it's very much iterative in that we almost need to see the local detail in order to then help evolve the national strategy and approach to delivery. So local energy strategies, local energy plans look across the piece at electricity, heat and transport. They take a whole systems approach, very much looking at establishing what needs to happen and where, and potentially when, because there are some things that make sense now and some things that will make more sense going forwards. Next slide, please. So this slide says that we've got 2 pilot local plans in place. Actually, there are 4 in place. The first movers years ago. Newport and Conwy, our pilot authorities over the last year, are just about complete now. I think Conwy's published theirs, and Pembrokeshire is also underway. But we're focusing from Welsh Government in supporting each of the regions to coordinate the rollout in support of the regional approach. And this should also make it easier for national and UK stakeholders to engage across authorities as well. So each of the regions is currently scaling up staff to support the other 18 local authority plans, which will be completed over the next 2 years. And the key element for, I suppose, today's presentation is to make sure that industry can feed into this process as it goes forward. And I and Hugh Lewis in my team, who's leading on this, really happy to make sure that that happens. Next slide, please. So the other piece of the jigsaw is the grid, and ideally you'd wait until you'd finished the local energy planning across Wales and come up with the national plan before you worked on the grid. But actually we're running this in parallel because of the urgency of doing something about the grid. So we're working with the Energy Systems Catapult on a 2-stage process. You can see there the phase that we're currently halfway through at the moment, which is setting up and really getting everybody on the same page as assumptions. Hopefully Click will give us the other half of that slide. Thank you. So the second stage from early summer will take us through the process of developing future Wales-specific future energy scenarios. These are similar to the National Grid future energy scenarios that inform the Great Britain grid planning. We've involved all the networks in Wales on this. Ofgem's also involved, and what we're hoping is that this will unlock the grid plans that are needed in the most likely futures. There will be a stakeholder group for this, and we will be contacting sector organisations in the next few weeks. We're also looking at a governance structure because we will need something that signs off both the future energy scenarios and the decisions about the local, regional and national energy planning in order to develop the national energy plan that we're committed to in Net Zero Wales by 2024. And I think this isn't intended to solve all our problems in terms of knowing what to do and where and when and how the grid is going to be developed to meet those needs now. Government historically overestimates what it can do in the short term and underestimates what it can achieve in the long term. And this is very much in that long term camp. This will not solve our grid issues this week, but we think it can make a huge difference to the next 30 years and have the best value, least impact, but most beneficial future for Wales outcomes that we're looking for. I think that's it from me at the moment, Dickie.
Okay, Jen, thank you very much indeed. Steve Watts, are you okay? Are you back online? Is everything working? I'm just looking at the chat.
Yeah, all good. Thank you very much.
Absolute pleasure. Jen, thank you very much indeed. Any absolute burners for Jen? Undoubtedly we'll get onto Baglan in due course, but any burners? Fab, thank you very much. Okay, third speaker from us is another dear friend, Dr. Andy Rees, he's even older than I am, which is lovely, and extraordinary CV in terms of recycling in circular economy, etc. And actually has recently received national recognition for his work. So we congratulate you on that. Andy, over to you, sir.
Vicky, thank you. Burdar, good morning, everybody. I'm going to quickly cover the important role that resource efficiency, industrial symbiosis, and a circular economy can achieve in helping you all reduce your carbon emissions. Next slide, please. We, of course, have the wellbeing goals for Wales. All 7 goals are equal, of course, but I just highlight a prosperous Wales, which isn't just about creating wealth and jobs, important though those are, but also about achieving a low carbon society, recognising the limits of the global environment. We only have one planet, and which uses resources efficiently. We've left the EU, but of course we still have various international obligations, and important amongst those are the 17 UN Sustainable Development Goals. And again, they're all equal, but highlighting Goal 12 on responsible consumption and production. And resource efficiency obviously forms a key part of that. Next slide, please. This diagram shows the life cycle of a product, all the way from material extraction on the top left, through the manufacture, use, and down to the disposal. Every part of that stage involves carbon emissions or greenhouse gas emissions. So highlighted within the circle there are the benefits of recycling, not only help reduce the upstream emissions, but also the downstream emissions, because you're not disposing of it, if it's biodegradable waste, to landfill and generating methane, but also really importantly, using recycled waste in many manufacturing industries can help reduce the power consumption that's needed. A classic example is glass. You need a much lower temperature to melt waste glass than to melt virgin sand. So resource efficiency, I will put to you, can achieve scopes 1, 2, and 3 emission reductions. So what a fantastic thing to do. Next slide, please. We've worked with colleagues across the Welsh Government on the various sector chapters in Net Zero Wales, and this is just highlighting the industry and business sector chapter. I'm pleased to see that one of the key ambitions there is for resource efficiency, resource and energy efficiency, product replacement, material substitution, waste reduction, etc., which is really good to see that having such a strong focus. Next slide, please. Apologies, this is slightly complicated, but it's based on the Ellen MacArthur Foundation butterfly diagram with some added extras. And thanks to Rhys Charles in Swansea University for adding the extras. In an ideal world, we'd all focus on the inner circles, and that's where you can get the best carbon emission savings. But we recognise not every type of waste can be, or not all products can be kept in productive life forever. And there's also, of course, industrial waste, particularly from manufacturing. So that outer circle there of industrial symbiosis is where there are certain types of waste that can be used as a feedstock by manufacturing, saving on virgin raw materials, saving on energy. That's what we would like to see happening. Next slide, please. I'd like to thank Ben Walsh from Innovate UK for generating this fantastic slide. He presented this to us a couple of weeks ago, and this shows he's done an analysis of the various carbon abatement policies advocated by the Committee on Climate Change, and he's highlighted that resource efficiency and energy efficiency, highlighted in the red circle there, can make a huge contribution towards reducing carbon emissions. So it's between a quarter and a third of those emissions. So he is very much a fan of promoting resource efficiency. Hopefully that's where Innovate UK may direct some of its funding in the future. Next slide, please. We have, of course, our central development strategy published last year. It has those various targets, including net zero carbon, using only our fair share of the Earth's resources, and really importantly, zero waste by 2050. which effectively means no waste going to landfill or energy from waste, and effectively 100% recycling and reuse. Next slide, please. Industrial symbiosis has been around for quite a long time. Hopefully I don't need to explain it to you, but the slides will be available afterwards. But here's some examples of what I managed to pinch off the internet. There's quite a lot of information there about the benefits of industrial symbiosis. Next slide, please. Really pleased to see the SWIC project, South Wales, with both eyes open. Very strange time.
Hi, Andy. Sorry, someone's put you on mute, just for you to be aware.
Okay, was that a hint that I need to speed up? I'm getting on. Pleased to see the Both Eyes Open project, which is focusing on the waste heat from the foundation industries in South Wales, and also the waste materials that could be used through industrial symbiosis by other companies. Next slide, please. It has produced, the project report includes this really great schematic showing how resource efficiency can impact and save emissions and save money, actually, all the way through the life cycle of manufacturing. Again, that's available, of course, for you to see later. Next slide, please. The highlights the important opportunities for things like pulverized fuel ash, slags, sludges, slurries, dust and fumes produced by the foundation industries and other industries, for example, the water industry in terms of water treatment, and how this could be used as a really valuable raw material by neighbouring industries. Next slide, please. So that is a quick canter through within the time that I'm allowed. Hopefully I've sold to you the benefits of resource efficiency, and I look forward to working with the Both Eyes Open project and the recommendations that they are making. Thank you.
Thanks, Andy. Any burners from anybody for Andy? Thank you very much. Okay, the fourth and final speaker from us is Gethin Weil, who has done a plethora of things with us and has now seen the light in relation to hydrogen and the joy that that is bringing us for smart living and the potential that it is in so many ways, from aviation fuels through to home energy, etc., etc. So Gethin, over to you. Thank you very much for coming this morning.
Thank you, Dickie. Hello, everybody. I've got about 5 slides. There's so much information on the hydrogen deployment policy at all levels, national, international. I've kept it fairly brief. And I know that several of the people on this call probably also contributed to a consultation last year. So you'll have a fairly decent knowledge of where we've been. But I'll just go through the background and then update you on current developments. So if you could do the next slide, please. You know, as we all know, hydrogen is a bit of a miracle vector now that we have to attain net zero by 2050. The technology behind making electrolytic or reformed hydrogen is they're old ones. It's a question of scale and investment and how that kind of links into renewable resources and also the energy markets. But it's seen as something that Wales has to kind of grasp the nettle of. All countries in Northern Europe are facing similar issues and have all started to work out quite detailed hydrogen deployment plans, looking at not only decarbonisation, but also economic growth and so behavioural change and customer acceptance. So we've also started to develop our own position on that, aligning, of course, wherever possible with what the UK government is also developing at a larger scale. So if you go to the next slide, please. The pathway document was originally intended as a sort of a basis for the net zero plan that Jonathan was mentioning earlier, and also to aid regional economic and energy planning as per Jen's presentation. It's developed a kind of added significance and also perhaps a little bit more of a a life since it came out in December 2020. We did the consultation last spring, early summer, and the initial horizons were quite short, with 2025, with some extending to 2030 for the policy and deployment planning. Mindful, of course, of the UK Government Energy White Paper, 10-point plan, and the various BEIS consultations that have happened since the summer of last year, and their policy announcements, and the imminent consultation results that will be published, I think, later this week, early next week, and the opening of various competitions for the production funds and the new hydrogen business model. We are necessarily going to review and perhaps progress some of these targets and deadlines in the next few months, and we're developing policy paper on that as I speak, and there will also be a summary published very shortly of the original results, which were shared extensively within government and also fed in directly to the net zero plan that was published in October. There still are 10 objectives that we're working from. A lot of those are looking at hydrogen end use, in particular types of markets, vehicular, transport, rail, very strong emphasis on public transport, based on previous research in the previous decade or so. Also looking at different types of production development, both green and small scale, and short term and longer term at volume in low carbon technology. These could perhaps give us a target, not just different to that the Scots have got, perhaps not at 5 gigawatts by end of decade, but setting ourselves something a little bit more ambitious. Certainly developers on the ground with RWE in Pembrokeshire and other actors such as Dolphin Flow, who are seeking to do work in the Celtic Sea using floating electrolytic platforms for hydrogen production, indicate that we will attain a higher target than the 100 megawatt that's cited here, well before end of decade. The pathway also addresses linkages with industry, have a place-based approach, not necessarily hubs as such, but those are emerging in Holyhead, Milford Haven, Deeside, Port Talbot, and other parts of Wales, but also looking at some places which have got unique characteristics such as Mid Wales, where there's energy islanding and the unique characteristics of the decarbonisation where hydrogen can fit in quite well, particularly in agribusiness. And then looking also at making alliances with other countries, other sources of policy and investment, and using particular mechanisms for doing so. You may be aware of High Cymru, the trade federation for hydrogen Wales run by Gitta Owen, and we are supporting that quite actively in all ways. Plus we have a hydrogen reference group which meets quarterly, which invites all sorts of opinions and shares research. We've had Element Energy as a consultant for the last 2 years, providing quite good global level knowledge and advice on Wales should position itself above and beyond the pathway recommendations. And we are looking forward to extending that contact to tender fairly shortly for an enhanced service, which will be perhaps more nurturing of particular ventures and parts of the economy than we have been able to do previously at a higher budget. So we'll be sharing that shortly once we've had the tenders back and we appoint the contractor. Can you go to the next one, please? This is roughly how the timeline looked for those 10 objectives. The bigger ticket items where there's lots of infrastructure required towards the end of the decade, unsurprisingly, and many of the kind of quick wins at the beginning are focused on OEM supply chains and sort of managed to get at least some degree of green hydrogen production available in parts of Wales where demand is likely to grow most swiftly, particularly with local authority fleet, for example. Here's the next one. And just quickly to give you some idea of the developments in train, several of these sort of facts have already been mentioned by other speakers on the panel. We've got a new climate change ministry, looking forward to Net Zero Industry Wales, what it'll develop in terms of bridging the gap between the kind of decarbonisation policy set and industrial need for the transition. Also, as I said, sharing a more rounded set of summative conclusions and next steps originating from the consultation last year. We're also, as I said, dynamically aligning with what BEIS and DFT are planning in terms of their hydrogen approach. Also looking at skills framework development. We do talk a great deal with SWIC. I do certainly with Chris and his team on all sorts of issues. And in addition, we do quite a lot of work with John Maddy, who's a great resource academically for the perspective from the UK research and innovation perspective, and with colleagues in innovation in the economy by the Welsh Government as well. And as I said earlier, we're looking to develop a more sort of detailed policy platform paper very shortly. And a colleague of mine, Triana Phillips, is working with me quite closely in our energy part of the House is well into developing that, and we're liaising with ministers and setting it out in the near future. So that's definitely going to happen soon. And as I said, we're looking for more work in terms of advising our stakeholders at a kind of global level of expertise, as we've already done with Element Energy. So if you go to the next slide. One example of one initiative that's very active and hopefully be quite promising in terms of its outcomes is an SPRI, Small Business Research and Innovation competition we're running. We launched at the end of last year. We've had about 17 contracts through from the fund on all sorts of levels of hydrogen deployment or service provision, infrastructure, proprietary technologies, and the like. Plus, we've got 3 higher level projects amongst those that are already prototyping and demonstrating in various parts of Wales. And we're looking forward to funding those again into a second, more developed prototyping phase for the next 9 or 10 months in the next financial year. So we'll be opening that to the existing phase 1 contractors fairly shortly, and we're urging them to work with people across Wales in industry in order to strengthen their offer, to make it more relevant, and to form sort of more resilient, more resourced consortia to deliver on the next phase. So hopefully you'll have a chance to talk to some of the these contractors in due course. I can supply a list of all of the projects in train via colleagues at SWIC after this meeting. If you'd like to talk to them, they're good public descriptors of what the projects are about and all the relevant contact details on the list. Pardon me, losing my voice. Can you just go to the next slide? This is a list of the feasibility level projects we're currently running. They're all reporting this week, so it's a bit crazy in terms of kind of finalising the reports and go through the deliverables, but they're all across Wales. Several of these, even though they're regionally specific, will be seeking partners pan-Wales for the next phase of their work. Several of these are also going to be very apposite for bidding for BEIS, the Net Zero Hydrogen Production Fund, when that comes online, hopefully at the end of April. So these are all people to perhaps have conversations with if you need to learn more and also add more content to your hydrogen portfolio or aspirations. So I certainly will share that after this meeting. And if you look at the next slide, these are the higher level projects. These all have potential to go to a phase 3 and to further prototyping work. They're really interesting. The passive work in Milford Haven has got great linkages to the existing work with the Port Authority in the Energy Kingdom there, which has already sort of deployed hydrogen for automotive use and small business use within the port area. And we're also working with Ballard Motor Solutions, previously known as Arcola, who are doing a lot of work in Scotland, and we're pitching some of their technology and know-how to work with Transport for Wales to see how we can start converting some of the train fleet for specific line use of hydrogen locomotives. So it's all very exciting stuff to share in great detail, but on the time of this meeting. So at that point, please, I'll end, and please quiz me or contact me after the meeting, and I'll make sure that I share the list of all these exciting projects with you, so you can dip in post-meeting.
Okay, fab. Thank you very much indeed. Okay, if I could ask the presenters to turn their cameras on, and we'll just have a look at the questions. Thank you very much, everybody. If you take somebody like me, I'm the sort of jack of all, whereas we've actually got the masters of their subjects in front of us, which is a sheer joy for me. Just before I go on to the questions in the chat, one of the criticisms that we in Welsh Government are quite often face, but I hope that we have allayed your fears over this one, is that we don't consult sufficiently well with industry, and we also don't consult up and down and feed and collaborate with UK government. I think yesterday, as an example, to prove that neither of those are correct, on Chris's initial briefing for SWIC Week 2, we had the Secretary of State for Wales, Simon Hart, and the Minister for the Economy, Vaughan Gethin, together. They both presented together. They all spoke at length about collaboration and supporting for each other, and the importance of the various policies finessing and complementing each other, which I think you have heard today, certainly in spades. And also in the room, we had presentations from academics, we had presentations from specific companies, and we had presentations from trade groups, from Pembrokeshire to Neath Talbot, etc. So it was a very, very good day. But the two politicians working very closely together and both emphasising the collaboration piece, which was vital for us, and particularly vital for Team Wales. So in terms of questions in the chat bar, Helen, lovely to hear from you. In terms of the point of contact, one particular individual, Wendy Boddington, would be very, very useful in terms of the North Wales Ambition Board, but also your Airbus hat as well in terms of this piece. And I'll put you in touch with Wendy. Great question from Kieran. What areas of support, grants, planning, etc. are available in Wales for businesses to set up waste recycling processes which generate carbon credits? Andy, do you want to start off with that one, sir?
Yes, sure. Well, there's the standard business support packages through Business Wales and the economic contract, but we're also going to launch a new version of the Circular Economy Fund, which has operated over the last 3 years, and we're currently looking at the extending the scope of that. So we're very keen to understand from businesses what the barriers are, and what can help unlock successful action. So funding for industrial symbiosis is one of those. Then we'll have a look at it, and then it'll be up to our minister to decide whether that should be appropriate or not. But I would hope relevant support will be provided in the future.
Okay, Jen, anything on your side?
Sorry, struggling with unmuting myself. Really, not on that. I mean, Andy's the lead on that particular topic, and the Welsh Government Energy Service that we support basically focus on the public and community sector, because Business Wales is the key source, I think, as Andy indicated, for businesses in the first instance.
Okay, thank you very much, Kieran. I hope that answers your question, sir. If there is anything else, we can pick it up. Nicholas, could you direct me to Energy Skills Development May 22? Great whistle stop run through. Anything, John, anything for Nicholas on that one?
What question was that again?
I think that was for Gethin, Dickie. It was off Gethin's slide.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. Yes, absolutely. Gethin.
Because I didn't quite catch what you said, Dickie. Can you say that again?
It's 11:18 from Nicholas. Could you direct me to Energy Skills Development May 22, please? Great whistle stop run through by all presenters. Thanks, Nick. You get a.
We're working quite closely with Shell, the internal kind of part of Welsh Government that's mandated to do skills and framework development for so the transition to the green skills we need for the net zero pathway to be achieved. The conversation happening all across the piece, including with stakeholders such as SWIC, and lots of workshops and opportunities for us to draw in kind of key stakeholders to kind of give their comments. It's a lengthy process. The whole education system really has to kind of re-gear. Many aspects of hydrogen deployment could see us, competing with other areas of post-pandemic skills needs. In Ireland, they're certainly worried about the construction sector competing with the sort of in the skills market that they require for engineers and construction to kind of set up facilities for electrolytic hydrogen. So there's a lot going on in that space, and I think it's late. I think colleagues might correct me, but it's late spring, early summer where things really start to get going. But in terms of regional skills partnerships, there has already been lots of conversations, and we're already supporting through High Cymru Trade Association some skills scoping separate to that with Coleg Cymru and Cardiff and Vale, and they've produced some research which will be in their final report that I'm getting this week, which hopefully we can put in the public domain and develop further, as well as a platform for employers on their website, which is also going to be a really useful service with modelling software attached as well. So I can send that link once it's live to colleagues at SWIC.
Okay, any of the other speakers, anything to add on that? Thank you very much. Okay, Helen, your point there, what support is developed to help businesses assess the options for decarbonisation? Many options, and the feedback I'm getting from other forums is that businesses may need help in defining their options. Absolutely, in terms of comms, market intelligence, brokerage, etc. So initially, you direct your requests to your regional teams, and also direct them to Chris in terms of SWIC and his link with Industry Wales. Chris, do you want to just come in there and just talk about the bridge for Helen in terms of businesses, please?
Yeah, for SWIC, in terms of helping businesses understand their options, it is an education for all of us. We're going through discussions as groups through the cluster plan, which is a part-funded project, and also through the deployment project, which is doing some engineering studies for us. We are getting closer interaction then with BEIS directly and some of the upcoming funding streams, some Industrial Energy Transformation Fund and some of the hydrogen funds that are coming through that the others have mentioned as well, that can support early investigations to help feasibility and understand technical options. So it is difficult to keep track of all that is going on and all the funds that are on offer. And that's one of the things we think, I suppose, in terms of SWIC in particular, that we can support our industries with. Yeah,
so don't forget, before I go to my, thanks, Chris. So Chris is very close to Industry Wales, and Industry Wales obviously has a skills lead, Bill Pieper, in terms of that specific support. But also we've got the 3 forums within Industry Wales, which would feed back, all absolutely driven by the, if you forgive the pun, in terms of the decarbonisation journey that we're all on. And also the regional teams, your business development managers, and they are specifically designed to either direct you towards Development Bank of Wales, Business Wales, or small grants or loans or financial support from us based under the economic contract that you heard about earlier on. So in terms of the access, it's talking to the forums, talking to whichever forum you're in, or if you're not in a forum, explore joining the forums, and then talking to your business development managers. If you've got one, if you haven't got one, the regional teams, and we can put you in touch with the regional teams, and they will come out to see how we can help you. And in many cases, it just goes down to old-fashioned brokerage and raising awareness of who, what, where, and when we have in Wales to support you. So that's Helen.
John's got his hands up, Dickie.
Yeah.
John,
can I just come in there? Just
Please.
to build on the points you made. Look, I'm fully bought into the need for brokerage and collaboration to get where we all need to be. That's going to be absolutely vital. For smaller businesses, Business Wales offers some support in trying to understand things like waste, but also carbon emissions. I think for larger organisations, there are already things that companies are mandated to do. So the Energy Savings Opportunity Scheme, ESOS, mandates larger organisations to look at their energy usage and the opportunities for energy efficiency, and that came from a European directive, the Energy Efficiency Directive. We obviously have carbon prices that should provide a pretty solid signal to larger organisations that there are significant savings available and internalise those carbon prices. So I think I suspect there are probably pretty strong signals for most organisations to really want to look at decarbonisation. What I would also say, though, is that there are standards out there that are very, very helpful in just baselining emissions to understand your scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions. And we're doing a lot of work with the public sector to understand those emissions, and that is proving very, very, very illuminating and pointing businesses and government bodies at significant savings for their business because of the waste in energy and other matter that they're seeing. So I think, yeah, agree that support needs to come, agree that collaboration, but also trying to point out that there are significant savings to be had as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, I'm just looking any more questions down the side. In terms of the net zero industry Wales, so very sadly, well, not perhaps Chris would say it differently, but Chris has been with us for 3 years, absolutely superb, but was seconded to us from Tata, and God bless Tata for allowing us to have Chris and Chris's expertise for so long. Sadly, he's got a day job, so he is returning back to Tata at some stage this year. And we, Welsh Government, are going to fund the Chief Executive of the Net Zero Industry Wales. We're starting that sort of process pretty shortly, and that organisation under James Davis and Industry Wales itself will be the link between strategic policy from the two governments that are relevant to us here, to from top down and bottom up, ensuring the business plan supports not only the political aspirations, but of course the industrial aspirations, because what is absolutely vital is we do everything that we possibly can to ensure you remain as competitive as possible in an extraordinarily changing environment. Very difficult indeed, and we are there to support you. I don't know if there's a colleague online. Anne Rainish, are you online?
Yes, I am.
Could you just turn your camera on for 2 seconds? Just introduce everybody to Anne Rainish. Anne was from a technical background, but is now going off to be for want of a better word, the number 2, the facilitator, the support to the Chief Executive of Net Zero Industry Wales. So all of us will see much more of Anne over the next couple of years. So welcome, Anne, and thank you. So in terms of that, I'm just going through onto the questions, because I'm going to ask a question, first of all, to Chris about what we can do in terms of industry fitting in with Team Wales. But whilst he's just getting his thoughts clear, I'm just going to see if there's anything else. Any other questions? Gem Pride, congratulations, and thank you. Hydrogen Reference Group. Do you want to give a very quick overview on that Hydrogen Reference Group, Gethin?
Yeah, very quickly. We meet quarterly. The consultants, we have Element Energy for the last 2 years, and in future their successor. They deliver very useful global and UK, EU level advice on what's happening in the markets, different types of policy interventions and funding. So it's quite handy for that. But we also invite key stakeholders to present on their own perspective. Those include the Wales and West, the energy operators, large emitters, SWIC. So it's a good clearinghouse for kind of the latest work that's going on in hydrogen. Plus we get BEIS, people to come and speak as well directly on various occasions, and we can relay back in a more kind of granular form the sort of feedback we get from BEIS as well in that setting. So it's free, and we've got about 200 members currently. So I'm trying to kind of restructure it so that GDPR does not prevent people networking with each other, which is a bit of an art these days, but yeah, that has to be done.
No. Well, I can say actually after yesterday meeting people and realizing that people A, smile and B, have legs was an absolute joy. At meeting people that I haven't met for 2 years was an absolute joy yesterday. In terms of the hydrogen piece, people will be interested in terms of the some of the sort of supply chain issue. We've been exploring very closely some of the work that's coming out of Tata and the steel sector, and looking at DRI and that type of aspiration. But I think you'll all be interested to know that the Steel Council, which is joint chair between the BEIS Secretary of State and at the moment Louis Sands, who is the chief executive of CELSA down with us in Cardiff. The Steel Council is coming to Cardiff. We have invited, the Minister Gethin invited the co-chairs to bring the Steel Council down. It's being held in CP2 in Cardiff on the 16th of May. And my aspiration is at the moment that we will have a number of stands, number of presentations, etc. So we can all get our point across to the captains of industry as they come into the meeting. So it's a real coup for us. So there we are. Okay. Jonathan, no problem. Right, Chris, in terms of the Team Wales approach, before I go to my colleagues, what else can industry do? How can they feed in? And I know that James Davis is on the call, so I'll probably call James in after Chris. But Chris, if you could start, what else can industry do for us as Team Wales?
Yeah, I suppose as industry, we've got together to form SWIC in South Wales, and that will now come under Net Zero Industry Wales. So that grouping, we've been together, as Dickie said, for 3 years and 3 months now, since January 2019. Through that, we have successfully pulled in UK Gov money to help us develop our cluster plan. So that cluster plan has got 12 months of support funding left. And during the next 12 months, what we're trying to do is understand all the steps and all the stakeholders, all the training, everything we need to get to net zero. We're trying to pull within that plan. It won't be a fixed plan. It'll be a plan for a plan, and then it will put steps down for each option potentially, and the discussions that we're going to need to have and the relationships we're going to need to have with the right people. So that's sort of how SWIC under Net Zero Industry Wales is envisaged will develop. Net Zero Industry Wales will continue the work that's developed under cluster plan after that part funding finishes. SWIC, Net Zero Industry Wales, will be a subscription-based entity, so people will join and pay a subscription fee. That subscription fee will be used as well to support regional activity and do some guidance and pull in facilitation to help us collaborate, because what we found out is collaboration takes a lot of resource in facilitating it in the right way. So that will help us facilitate and get to some of the challenging questions we've got. So by joining SWIC, you're in that collaboration. You're chipping into a pot of money that will help us all develop our regional futures and supply and help the region develop what we need to make things in a net zero way. We then have a monthly meeting with the people you can see on the screen. Thank you very much, with Welsh Government. And through that monthly meeting, I think we're still sort of, I suppose we're learning how that monthly meeting is going to operate going forward. And some weeks are good and some weeks are not so good. And we're learning what we can agenda and what we can discuss and what we can bring to the meeting. The idea is as industries, as we explore our options and our challenges, and as Welsh Government have got difficulties with understanding why industry is moving in a different way, we've got that monthly meeting to try and meet, discuss and explore opportunities. Also, as UK government funding becomes available, through that meeting, hopefully we'll be able to say, right, as a Team Wales, how are we going to attack that UK government funding to make sure as much of that comes to Welsh industry as possible. So that monthly meeting, I think, is going to be more and more important as we develop our collaborative relationships. So for South Wales, I think it's get involved with SWIC, join SWIC. Obviously the trade associations we work closely with. I suppose for Wales, we've got Green Energy Wales, we've got High Cymru, we've got Renewables UK Cymru, and we've got SWIC, which from an industrial decarbonisation perspective are key. But then, as Dickie said, we liaise in with some of the sector groups then in terms of Aerospace Wales, Welsh Automotive Forum and Technology Connect for those specific sectors. So we've got overlaps, and I think what we haven't done yet really maybe is pull together a collaboration of those collaborative groups just to get a high level steer as to make sure we're all moving in the right direction. We all know what we're working on to support our own individual areas. I think so that went on a bit then.
No, I think that's very fair in terms of that, and that's one of the things that Anne is going to major on, because there are, so many people trying to help and supporting is just focus those. Talking about a focus, James, anything to add in terms of the Team Wales piece?
Yeah, I think we are recognising, all of us, that industry decarbonisation is not a single body, whether it's a government or a private sector company solution. So in Team Wales, we've got to drive a different engagement and narrative on the subject. We know that companies need to work together to cooperate at a regional level, cooperate together in supply chain activity, cooperate together in infrastructure issues. We also have an engagement issue, which is, there are a lot of companies that can easily recognise the decarbonisation problem in both emissions and in energy lines. But we have a vast number of companies that yet do not understand the context of industry decarbonisation in their own business. So the key thing for us is to use Net Zero Industry Wales as part of that communication, engagement, inspiration activity on it. We can talk about funding, pulling funding down. We can talk about discrete experiments. But actually, this is about changing thinking, behaviour and culture. So I think that's will have the bigger impact for us in the end within the Team Wales environment of it. In that regard, then industry has to play a very key role in that and ensure that it remains centre in a wider engagement with, particularly with the SME and the local community.
Okay, thanks, James. John, I'm going to come to you, reference David's question 1139 in the chat. But first of all, if I can answer Michael's question in terms of Welsh companies within the electric vehicles, your first port of call will be to the Welsh Automotive Forum and to Rob O'Neill. They've got a very good supply chain mapping process of which component company is doing what in terms of EVs and EV potential. So just give Rob a call and also at the strategic level, from my team, I have colleagues who have observer status on the Society of Motor Manufacturers and Traders Board, and we host the Automotive Council and some of their supply chain work on a regular basis as well. So links are strong. Use us, Michael, should you not know Rob. I hope that answers your question. John, anything for David in terms of the CCA scheme and his question of 1139, sir?
Thanks, Dickie. I didn't understand the last sentence. Where does this strategy fit in? I.e., where does the CCA fit into the decarbonisation of industry in the UK? I mean, this isn't a slopey shoulder comment, but it is one that needs to be targeted at the UK government, because they're the arbiters of taste when it comes to the CCA. So we have very little opportunity to decide what's happening there. So the best way that any organisation can influence that is by being active through the consultation process. We too will be looking to understand the implications of that for industry in Wales, but industry groups and trade bodies really need to be responding to the UK government consultations and making their cases, and then it becomes for the UK government to decide how that will operate. UK government will be factoring in the CCA alongside all of the other opportunities and burdens for industry. So as I say, I would strongly advocate your industry to engage with the consultation.
Okay, thank you, John. Jen, anything to add on that?
Can I ask?
Please, Chris.
I say, as industries, are we typically very good at replying to Welsh Government consultations? In maybe not the big corporates, but the smaller, medium companies.
Well, I'm going to, as I'm the diplomat in the room, the responses could be stronger, shall we, and could be more numerate. Okay. Yes. Okay. More feedback gratefully received, I think, is the answer on that one, Chris.
Okay. I think it's fair to say that even the large corporates tend not to do it as a matter of course. And at the SME level, it really is rolled up into the trade body responses. It doesn't occur very often. If they do occur, then there is a response normally back to that individual company from it. But it's something that we do recognise is not strong enough at the moment as regards industry voice.
Yeah, but we also do recognise that many of our companies are SMEs, and the key leaders within the SMEs haven't got enough time in the day, frankly. So they're it's a pressure cooker for them, poor things.
Can I just add something, Dickie?
Sorry, John.
Just a thought from somebody who looks at the odd consultation response. Trade body responses are really, really valuable where SMEs are involved. That is really effective. Sometimes, unfortunately, they lack detail because they're trying to represent so many organisations, and the best responses to consultations have evidence. It's not just an opinion, it's evidence. And I appreciate that that's challenging for any business to be able to spend the time gathering evidence and presenting that. But that's far more compelling for a civil servant and a minister, whether they are sat in Cardiff or London or wherever. The quality of the response has a direct impact on the weight it is given, frankly, when it's considered in a consultation. But also the events as well. When we put on consultation events, people who come armed with evidence to those events and thought through views on the questions that are being asked, we apply greater weight.
That's true.
So I suppose you could say industry is facing its biggest ever change at the moment in the transition to net zero, and that's only going to happen with the right policies in place.
Correct.
And the way you develop those policies is through the consultations and through the evidence that backs those consultations. So consultation is going to be more important now than ever.
Absolutely right. These are the ones that certainly that I've always been involved in are not consultations in name only. They are genuine consultations. We think we know what we need to achieve. There are options for how we achieve it. What do you think? We genuinely want to know.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, I'm just going to pull that, Jen, and then I'm going to ask you, when you've answered that one, I'm going to ask you a question on local area energy plans and regional energy plans, but over to you first on that one.
Yeah, I just wanted to support everything that's been said. I think we as officials in government, we are doing a lot of things and we don't have very much time, and absolutely appreciate, having been, running my own business, how it's almost impossible to find any time to engage with these really abstruse, future-looking things that don't seem that relevant to the day-to-day. But unless we find ways to involve everybody in this, and different ways almost of engaging with people so that we do understand the issues, then as everybody's just said, we're not going to get the outcomes that we want. And I'm hoping that those regional structures, if we're working together, cheek by jowl on how we deliver some of these issues, then that's one route through which we can start to understand the problems a bit better, I think, that we all face. Okay, just if you get your thoughts around local area energy plans, I'll just look at Gethin made the point about Proteum, who is Jen Baxter is an absolute key member on the Industry Wales board, and is not slow in promoting the matters for sustainable aviation fuel and hydrogen, etc. And we look forward to her comments on a very regular basis. They're linking in with Cardiff University at the moment at Cardiff Airport. And don't forget, we own the airport and therefore can facilitate anybody, if it fits in with their business plan, of course, that wishes to expand either in Cardiff Airport or in Brotathen next door, facilities and support, etc. In terms of Andy, the old CBI environmental group, don't know, Andy, we'll find out, but the CBI were there yesterday. Jane, thank you very much. Lovely to hear from you. Interest net zero, yep. And okay, so that's so far in the chat. Jen, one of the big issues, because I spend so much of my time dealing with the larger companies in Wales, one of the bigger issues is that they are left out in terms of some of the, or even ignored. I was accused of ignoring one particular company once in terms of the local energy plans and the regional energy plans, etc. Can you comment on that and give us some advice and guidance, please? Well, I think I'd be fascinated to understand who feels they've been ignored, because that's certainly not what we're trying to achieve. We've only done a couple of the local energy plans so far, so I suppose it's the level of it. We're back to almost the problem we were just talking about, which is who's got the capacity and the time to be involved in these conversations. So I think a lot of the energy planning work revolves around a technical process, and I think it's in terms of agreeing what the data is that goes into that process, and then what we do with the outcomes. So it's almost, we run a series of different futures which come with different outcomes, and then the tricky bit is then interpreting those results that come out of that process, and then deciding, if you like, what sort of what we want to do within that place, and which of the competing priorities get picked up going forwards. So I think we're very open in terms of the way that we organise local energy planning and regional energy planning, in terms of saying how and where is best to involve people in this process. We don't know. We've done 2 pilots. We've got 18 more, so we've got 18 more chances to get it right. Let us know what hasn't worked. If there's organisations that don't feel it worked for them, then feedback. I'm particularly interested in how we make sure industry inputs into this, because I think there's been some perceptions that industry hasn't been involved. There's a lot of data privacy issues, I think, to sort out in terms of people sharing the data that's needed. And one of the things we're looking at is, can we actually collect data across the whole of Wales, sort of do it once in one single platform that then minimises the the demands on lots of other people. So I think that's a really interesting area that certainly Cardiff Capital Region is really interested in, that could potentially have much stronger outputs. So I think the question is, tell us the problems and we'll do our absolute level best to fix them without demanding huge amounts of time and effort from people who haven't got that much time and effort to put in.
Yeah, I think that's very fair, and I would hope people appreciate that very candid answer. One of the questions that I was asked last week at the Aerospace Growth Partnership Board was the possibility of some systems architecture to unlock the grid. Has that any thoughts on that, Jen? Any guidance?
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? I remember when I first came into this area about 15 years ago, somebody saying that we need a system architect at a UK government discussion. I think the question is, what would a systems architect do? Because there isn't one individual organisation. I think UK government are doing some consultations at the moment about the role of the energy system operator that was a part of National Grid that's been broken off. There are so many different, you very suddenly descend into very complex technical questions on this. I think what we're trying to do is almost have not a systems architect, but a systems plan for Wales.
Okay.
That's what the energy and the grid planning is about. It's about what is the system that we want, and then what are the levers in terms of both infrastructure, but also in terms of the regulatory mechanisms and the processes that govern the use of the energy system that need to change in order to give us the system we want. So I'm hoping, and we're certainly working in terms of the deep dive that the Deputy Minister ran on energy from over the autumn. There are a number of working groups going on that came out of that. One is about that discussion with Ofgem about the proposal the grid came up, the group came up with, which is about a system architect. What does it actually mean? And we're always going back to the people who suggested it to unpick, work out exactly what a systems architect would do, so that we can work out how then that requirement that the system architect almost articulates is satisfied, without necessarily pointing to somebody and saying, you're the systems architect, get on and solve all the problems.
No, absolutely. Okay, Chris, is it quick, sir?
Yeah, I was just going to back up what Jen's said about the local area energy plans. We think they are going to be really good. We are, thanks to Jen, supporting them as Industry Wales in terms of the trial too, and then developing further, and then pushing how we get industry as much and engaged as we can. Really like the fact that they'll be repeated. So as we all start to learn our options and all start to develop a ways further forward, they can feed more accurately into the plan. So I just want to put a supportive word in, recognising the challenges we've got in the early days in working out how it all comes together.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm going to draw the questions to a close. Thank you very much indeed to the speakers, and thank you very much to the audience. Some really good questions, and in fact we will retain the questions. And Minesh, I'm just reading your point here, 1153. The answer is yes, we would love to hear more. Thank you very much indeed. So in summing up, ladies and gentlemen, first of all, thank you for Chris. Good luck with the rest of the week. Keep talking. If I can just a plea to my colleagues, make sure that the information that we gain and we advise and guide is pushed down to the forums, pushed down on via our various means to the SMEs, to the industry, so vital to Wales itself. And could I just make a plea to industry, ask, talk, question, get in touch. I didn't know this, I didn't do that, etc. Please, you now know who the key people are. Talk to us, use your forums, use the trade organizations, and we need to combine everything and all our thoughts together for our futures over this. So it's just the dignity of employment is the dignity of the UK and very much the dignity of Wales. So I'm going to draw it a close. Thank you very much to the facilitators for putting this together. I hope we have answered as many of your questions as possible. If there's anything, put it in the bar a little bit later on, and we can pick them up, and Chris can pick them up, and whoever is responsible will come back to you in due course. But everybody, thank you very much indeed. I've certainly enjoyed it. I hope you have too. Cheers, guys. Thanks very much. Bye now.
Loud. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks
Bye.
all.